My cousin Aman had always been the quiet type, steady, thoughtful, the kind of man who believed in building rather than breaking. When he married Sana 2 years ago, most of us thought he'd found his anchor. She was bright, outspoken, and confident, maybe too much for him. Still, they seemed to balance each other out. Or so we thought. It started with arguments. Small at first, petty things about late nights at work, missed calls, forgotten groceries. But over time, they grew sharper, louder. Aman never said much, but I could see the strain wearing him down. His eyes, once calm and observant, now seemed distant, unfocused. He laughed less, talked even less. We all noticed, but no one interfered. Marriages are private battles, after all. Then one evening it happened. After a particularly heated argument, this time about something as trivial as his reluctance to attend a family function, Sana packed her bags and left. Just like that. No tearful goodbyes. No dramatic scene. Just a quiet, chilling exit. She went back to her parents' house and refused to answer his calls. The change in Aman was immediate and unsettling. He stopped going to work. His phone stayed off for days. I'd call, message, knock on his door, silence. When I finally let myself into his flat with the spare key, I found him sitting on the edge of his bed, unshaven and unmoving, staring at nothing. The air smelled stale, the curtains shut tight against the sun. Plates piled in the sink. Clothes scattered on the floor. A man unraveling. I tried to speak, but he barely acknowledged me. Just a nod. A flicker in his eyes that told me he recognized me, but didn't care enough to say so. I stayed a while, tidied up a bit, made tea he didn't drink. Then I left, heart heavy. The next day I returned. And the next. Something in me couldn't stay away. Maybe it was guilt, maybe something else I didn't want to name just yet. I started talking to him, even if he didn't answer. I told him stories from when we were kids. Joked about how he once cried when his favorite cricket bat broke. Slowly, his eyes began to shift toward me when I spoke. Not fully, but enough. I'm not sure she's coming back, I said gently one evening, not as a fact, but as a feeling. But even if she doesn't, you're not alone. He looked at me for the first time in days. Really looked. That was the moment I knew something had shifted. Not in him. In us. And I didn't know whether to feel relief or guilt. The following days fell into a quiet rhythm. I visited him on each evening. No longer out of obligation, but something deeper, an ache I couldn't quite name. He still didn't say much, but he let me in, let me stay. That was enough. One night, I found him sitting on the balcony, wrapped in an old sweater, watching the city lights flicker in silence. I sat beside him, not saying a word at first. The cold brushed against our skin, but something warm hovered between us. He turned slightly and asked, "Why are you doing all this?" The question caught me off guard. "Because I care," I replied simply. He nodded, slowly, eyes still fixed on the night. Everyone else disappeared after she left. I didn't, I said. That night, I stayed longer than usual. We talked, really talked. He told me things he never had before. How Sana had been emotionally distant for months, how he'd begged her to stay, how ashamed he felt that she left anyway. His voice cracked as he admitted, "I feel like a failure." I reached for his hand, hesitant but certain. "You're not," I said, squeezing gently. "You gave everything." She chose to walk away. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It wrapped around us, tender and understanding. He didn't let go of my hand. The next evening, he cooked dinner, simple dal and rice, but it felt like a grand gesture. We sat across from each other, a flickering candle between us. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. And I smiled back, letting myself enjoy the simplicity of it. But something unspoken stirred beneath the surface. Later, as I stood to leave, he followed me to the door. Our hands brushed. I turned to say goodbye, but his gaze stopped me. It lingered, soft, searching. A second passed. Then another. And without a word, he stepped forward and pulled me into a hug. It was supposed to be quick, reassuring, but he held on. And I didn't let go. The closeness, the the warmth, it overwhelmed us both. He leaned back just enough to look into my eyes. There was hesitation, then a resolve. He kissed me. It was gentle at first, unsure. I froze, not in fear, but realization. This was wrong. It was right. I didn't know, but I didn't pull away. He led me to the bedroom, slowly, deliberately. No words passed between us. Just the unspoken understanding that something irreversible was happening. He locked the door. I didn't question it. As his hands reached for the hem of my shirt, I let my breath catch, but I didn't stop him. And when he laid me down and touched me like I was something fragile and sacred, I gave in. Not to him, but to everything I'd buried inside me for years. The night swallowed the rest. And by morning, nothing between us was the same. The morning after wasn't filled with regret, but with silence. Aman woke before me. I heard him moving quietly through the apartment, making tea, folding the blanket we'd pushed aside in our fevered need. When I sat up, wrapped in his shirt, he glanced over from the doorway. There was no awkwardness, only uncertainty, hovering like a thick fog between us. Last night, he began, voice low, wasn't planned. I nodded, but it wasn't a mistake. His shoulders relaxed slightly. He handed me the tea, our fingers brushing. I feel like I betrayed her, he said, sitting beside me. Even after everything she did, this feels like something I should feel guilty for. I looked at him, really looked. You didn't betray her. She left. She gave up. You just let yourself be comforted. He didn't reply, but the way he reached for my hand again told me he was listening. Over the next few days, we didn't talk about it. But everything changed. Our silences were no longer filled with grief, but with anticipation. I caught him watching me as I moved around his flat. He began shaving again, dressing better, leaving the windows open. He played music in the mornings. Life had begun to seep back in. But with life came questions. His phone lit up one evening with a message from Sanaa's sister. She's asking if you want to talk. Should I tell her you're ready? He read it once, then deleted it without responding. She's reaching out? I asked quietly. Yes, he admitted. But I don't want to go back. I don't think I can. I wanted to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt guilty for being the reason he wouldn't try. Or perhaps for being the excuse he needed not to. You sure it's not just comfort with me? I asked, voicing the fear I hadn't dared admit. He turned to me, eyes unwavering. No. I think I stopped loving her long before she left. I just didn't know how to say it out loud. That night, he kissed me again, not with the desperation of grief, but with the clarity of choice. Still, I couldn't silence the voice in my head whispering about what people would say. Cousin or not, I had crossed a line. Family wouldn't understand. They'd see betrayal. They'd see scandal. But when he looked at me like I was the only thing that made sense in his broken world, I began to care less about what they'd think, and more about what we could become. Something real was unfolding. Quiet, dangerous, and intoxicating. We hadn't spoken about what this was, or what came next. But something told me a decision was coming. A week passed. Then two. What began as quiet comfort had grown into something unmistakable. Love, or something dangerously close to it. Aman was different now. He laughed without hesitation, spoke with purpose, and when he touched me, it wasn't fleeting. It was as if he had chosen me, us. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, he sat beside me on the floor, both of us wrapped in the warmth of a shared blanket. There was no ceremony in his voice, no rehearsed words, just honesty. I don't want to live a life built on what-ifs, he said. And I don't want to waste another day waiting for someone who's already gone. I turned to him, unsure what he meant, until he added, I want to marry you. The words lingered, unreal, suspended in the air between us. You're serious? I whispered, barely trusting my voice. I've never been more sure of anything, he replied. What we've done can't be undone. But what we feel, what I feel, is real. I know it's not traditional. I know people will talk. But they don't live our lives. We do. For a moment, My chest tightened with fear. Marriage. Not just love, but a lifelong declaration of it. A union that would demand explanation, justification, courage. I thought of our parents, of whispers behind closed doors, of judgments passed without understanding. But I also thought of the nights we spent talking in silence, of the way he reached for my hand like it grounded him, of how I no longer felt like an outsider in my own heart. I want that too, I said at last. I want you. Amon smiled, not with glee but with relief. He leaned forward, kissed my forehead, and exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for years. The next few days were a blur of quiet preparations. No grand announcements. Just conversations, careful and honest, with those closest to us. Some reactions were warm, some hesitant, others cold. A few family members cut contact entirely. Others, surprisingly, offered their blessings after understanding the full story. Sana never returned. She never even called. Her absence became its own kind of closure. On the day of our nikah, there were no flowers or festivities. Just a small gathering in Amon's living room, where I had once found him broken. Now he stood beside me whole. As I signed the papers, I didn't feel like I was stealing anything. I felt like I was stepping into something that had quietly, steadily become mine. Later that night, as we lay side by side in the dark, his fingers intertwined with mine, I whispered, "Does it still hurt?" He paused before answering. "No," he said, "because you're here." And in that moment I knew we had rewritten the ending.